All right, Tom, we've got you on the show. Welcome to the Once Bitten podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
And thank you again for reaching out when you were in London and meeting my wife and my oldest daughter, Caitlin. You've not met Lauren yet, and for picking up the tab. That was very much appreciated. Really was not expecting that, but it was great to hang out with you.
Yeah, no problem. I really enjoyed it. You've got a great family. Very impressed. Yeah.
Thank you. And actually, before we get into this, Lauren has just been watching part of the movie, right? You've been helping prep dinner, and she had Climate the movie on play in front of her,
Nice.
just as a refresher because you've seen it before.
Yeah.
And Caitlin had seen it before, and she had questions for you if you remember at lunch.
Yes.
And I want to ask this to Lauren because this came up in our conversation with Caitlin, who's now 19. The opening scene of the movie is Greta, right, giving her address. How dare you? You know, the classic. How did that make you feel when you were young watching that? Do you remember having any kind of emotion, or were you too young?
I don't remember having any emotion. When I watched it then, I didn't really have any emotion.
No?
I just listened.
Right. Okay. Because Caitlin was telling Tom
Mm.
that she remembers because she would have been a little bit like 13, 14, I guess, when she first saw that. And yeah, she was telling Tom how it scared her.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me sad that any kid is scared, of course, about this stuff. No kid should worry about this at all because, of course, there's no problem. If kids are losing sleep about it or they think they have no future because of this, that is sad.
Yeah, it's we have so much to undo, Tom, really. And you know, many people have asked me before because I asked the final question, if you had one last orange pill, who would you give it to and why? And I've been saying Greta for a long time because of the damage I've seen it, you know, her actions do to that age group. It's really very, very sad.
Good intentions, but bad outcome. No?
Uh,
You don't think so?
I don't think she had good intentions. I think she was a controlled puppet. But I asked Tom, what do you think?
Maybe she personally had good intentions. Maybe I don't get the sense that she knew all along that this is all baloney and she's trying to foist one over on us. The story is that she wouldn't eat. She was so worried about the polar bears starving or something that she personally wouldn't eat and all that. So I think there may have been some sincerity on her part about this, but I do think other people are trying to control it, of course. Yeah.
Hmm. All right. So, Lauren, what did you have? First question. What is it for Tom?
What made you want to make a movie on climate change?
Oh yeah, it's I was a big fan of Martin Durkin, who did the Great Global Warming Swindle in 2007. I love that movie. It still stands up to this day. It's great. So just on a whim, I invited him to be on my podcast, and as we were talking on the podcast, he said, if I had a chance to make the movie again, I think I could do a better job. I'd love to make the movie again, and that's what kicked off the whole thing. That I just started working with him, and within a little over a year, maybe we had the movie done. But I give him all the credit in the world. Him and his team are really good at what they're doing. I was just on the side doing some stuff in the background, but he does get the credit for writing the script and doing the interviewing. And I think he really knows how to make a good movie and put out a lot of important information in a digestible way. So yeah, I love that guy. I do.
So that's Martin Durkin, yeah?
Martin Durkin from
Right.
London.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great climate swindle. Is that what you said?
The Great Global Warming Swindle. It was on
Global warming.
TV in the UK in about 2007. And there was a huge blowback because at that time you couldn't put out anything like this. We expected that there might be a blowback like that this time around, but there wasn't. It's a very different world. There was hardly any mainstream media blowback at all about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll
Mhm.
find the link for that and put that link in the show notes so people can go and watch that movie for those that haven't yet,
Yeah.
alongside the link to your movie as well, Climate,
Mhm.
the movie.
Mhm.
Um, any other questions, Lauren?
Yeah, I have two more.
Okay, good.
Do you think in the future global warming will actually become a thing or it will never?
Oh, I think it would CO2 induced warming will never be a problem ever. Yeah, I'm not worried about that. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. The Earth may well get way warmer than it is now at some point and way colder than it is now. I think it's just going to continue to fluctuate. But I think the Earth will never get dangerously warm. In the whole course of human history, it's gotten too cold for us quite a bit. The cold periods have always been bad, but there's been no point in the last 200,000 years when the Earth has gotten anywhere near to too warm. So we're way closer to too cold than too warm. So I'm not worried at all for my grandchildren or anyone else that the Earth is going to get too hot. It's not going to happen. Not worried about it.
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of hard because when my friends talk about global warming, sometimes I have to bite down on my tongue. I'm just like, mm.
Do
Well,
they talk about it a lot? Do you hear that from your friends a lot that they're worried about it?
No, it's like from a friend of a friend or like just people in my school. They're just like, oh yeah, global warming. And it's like, is it like?
mhm.
But sometimes I just know where to give up because it's just like, yeah, they're not really gonna listen to me. Um,
What else? What else are they talking about? What are the other big topics of the day in 13-year-old land?
I don't really know. I don't really hang out with those people.
Born a Bitcoiner. Okay, what's your next
Excellent.
question?
What was the hardest part on making the movie?
What was the hardest part? Again, Martin Durkin did all the work while I sat there and watched him do the work. So there was nothing that was difficult for me. Martin said it was like giving birth to an elephant. He said it was very difficult, I think, to find out what to include. Maybe that was a big part of it. You can't do a movie that's 20 hours long. He had to get it down to 80 minutes. So he was constantly cutting stuff out and trying to figure out how to condense it down to 80 minutes. And still, when people who are really into the global warming thing, when they watch the movie, they're constantly saying, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't talk a lot about Milankovitch cycles and stuff." And everybody wants you to put another 10 minutes in about their thing if they're most interested in. So I think condensing it down is one of the toughest things.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a really simple and good explanation.
Yeah.
And it showed all the graphs, and I liked when all the pictures came up from different times and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's excellently done. That was one, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of like the debunking things that you had to face. Obviously, you said mainstream media didn't come after you, but
Yes.
the good old fashioned debunking troll gang would have been very much up in your faces. And I've seen negative feedback. Oh, these graphs are skewed and blah blah blah. I'm
Right.
like, what are you talking about? Like the only graph you've ever looked at, like up until this point, has been skewed the other way. So this is just righting the ship, from what I could tell.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One of the big criticisms was there's a graph from Lundquist and it says Lundquist 2000 and the real number is Lundquist 2010. So it said a zero in there where it should have said a one. So they're pointing out, oh, look at that. There's a mistake in this movie. But anyway, it doesn't change the thrust of anything else. If they're going to criticize us for that, then I'm pretty happy, very happy.
What were you going to say?
The problem with people is they watch a movie and most of the people in the movie have done a lot of research and they haven't, well, most likely haven't done any.
Well, the people watching.
Well, a lot of people.
For the people watching, it'd be like the first time maybe that, but they're listening to or watching somebody who's been a career scientist, studying this stuff, trying to give you the data points that they've, and the characters that are wrong. It's not a film, right? It's a documentary. The experts, again, I don't want to use that word. The scientists that you have, the professionals that you have in the movie, they come across very eloquently, and like their background is amazing and unquestionable.
Worked for 3 presidents, did something for Obama.
Yeah. One thing I like about this whole being on my side of this argument is that all of the data is on our side because there really CO2 isn't the climate control knob. There's nothing wrong with the weather at all. You can look at any type of weather you want and none of it's getting worse. It's just the weather fluctuates and there is absolutely no cause for alarm. It's not like, we should be kind of alarmed. There's just nothing alarming that's happening that's caused by CO2. So I enjoy the fact that it's so easy to be on this side of the debate.
We've lived a lie. many decades old, long lie again.
Did you ever believe Daniel yourself? I forget. You did not, right?
I did.
He did.
You did a little? Okay.
Yeah, I did.
You loved Greta because like she was homeschooled and
No, she wasn't
she
homeschooled.
wasn't. Oh,
No, no, she was just like, she was just saying, she did that TED talk, that I'm slightly autistic, and when I see the truth, I can't unsee the truth. And because of my condition, I have to look at the numbers and I have to do the research and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I did. Even before that, I guess before that, I was just more concerned with just general stuff like polluting rivers, bad, obviously. Just general littering, bad, obviously. Um, Pollution, like smog, in built up cities and stuff that you can see. You don't want people walking around in smog, and that comes from like industrial burning of coal and dirty fuels and blah blah blah. So that there was something tangible there, but over the years and being in the Bitcoin space and listening to people like Tom and Safe was very formative on this because he had Patrick Moore on his podcast and da, 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 da. Alex Epstein.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
in his books, and they went. I was thinking Alex Gladstein, but he's the other dude. He's the
Yeah.
IMF dude. Alex Epstein is the fossil fuels guy, and that fossil fuels are a scam. And then I listened to a podcast randomly about the Rockefellers and abiotic oil theory, and
Oh
that
yeah.
spun me out. Like this is I'm like, what? There's another theory to fossil fuels? Like, what? Of course there is. Why? So then, then everything starts unraveling, and you just look at it, and so here's a good example, right? Current carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I believe, is about 450 parts per million. Is that about right?
Maybe 425 or so around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Lauren, if this page represents 1 million parts, yeah,
Mm.
that dot there is carbon dioxide. But we're worried about that. That makes no sense. We're worried about that in the air. And that is supposed to change the heat of a planet. I mean, come on.
The whole scare is supposed to be based on one extra CO2 molecules for every 10,000 molecules in the air. That's the whole thing. So it's be causing all the hurricanes and whatever, 1 out of 10,000. But yeah, it's amazing that this lasted as long as it did. And it's mind blowing.
So sleep easy, girlfriend.
Yeah.
We got this. It's all right. So why do you think Tom's on a Bitcoiner podcast talking about climate change?
Probably because most Bitcoiners have more of an open mind. Well, I know you're interested. You're not only interested in Bitcoin, you're interested in theories, you're interested in stories, you're interested in, well, basically everything that you're lied to about, and you want to know more.
Pretty much everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. And I guess now you've unraveled so much, you want to know what else you were lied to about.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's why other people would be listening.
Right. Do you think Tom is
Oh,
a
right.
Bitcoiner?
Are you? I don't actually know. Are you a Bitcoiner?
I am. Yes, I am a Bitcoiner. I'm more and more. Yeah, I've been listening to Daniel's podcast, a lot of other podcasts. So yeah, just for 2.5 years or so, I've been orange pilled, I would say. I love it. Mhm.
So he went on Uncle Marty's podcast to talk about the movie, and he went on Safer Dean's podcast to talk about the movie. Any others Bitcoin pods?
Yeah, a few of them. Is it Stefan Livera?
Yeah, Stefan. Oh,
Yeah,
and Walker. You've been on Walker's
I've
show
been
as
on
well.
Walker's podcast. Yeah, I've been on a few of them. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
great. So his work piqued our interest, and then we invite him on to like Bitcoin podcasts, and that piques his interest. So we feed off each other. It's brilliant, and we're able to lean into this whole climate debate and help Tom get the word out, and he's able to lean in and learn about Bitcoin and become another Bitcoiner, and our numbers grow, and the orange pilling will never cease.
Yeah, so a win-win.
Absolutely.
So I should share, as of 2022, I was just all into the climate debate and zero into Bitcoin at all. And I was invited to be on Safe Dean's podcast and Marty Ben's podcast. And that kind of kicked off my interest in Bitcoin. Before that, I was a huge fan of Berkshire Hathaway and Charlie Munger and Buffett. And they said it was rat poison squared and you're whatever. It's incredibly stupid. And I thought, oh, I trust those experts for this. So I'm not going to dig into it any further. But I had to get over that mindset of trusting the experts. So I'm feeling better now that I'm looking into stuff for myself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's the only reason that the Gretas of the world believe in this whole climate scam thing. You cannot look at all the data for yourself and go, oh no, CO2 is making the weather worse. A huge part of it is you have to trust that someone else has looked into it and you trust them. So I think trusting the experts is the biggest problem in the whole climate scam thing. Yeah.
And it's not like we can get in a jet and go up in the air and take samples ourselves. You've got to give over, a certain amount. You can't don't trust verify absolutely everything, but data picking, which is critical thinking, is something that you have to try and cultivate over time. So when if you're just getting your information, like many people do, from mainstream media or the Daily Mail headlines, then their minds are going to be just led down the garden path every single time. But when you listen to like the guests that Tom had on his documentary, you get a completely different view of things, and you can lean in and use their expertise over their professional careers.
I just want to say one quick thing. Another thing about the documentary that was good, was it was reassuring that the world wasn't gonna burst into flames. So yeah.
Well done.
Wonderful. One thing I'd like to say is the narrative is you're supposed to be a climatologist to understand this, and don't worry your pretty little head. You can't figure this out for yourself. But as a 13-year-old, easily, when people say, oh, the crops are going to fail because of CO2, you can go online, you can look at Our World in Data and see what's going on with crop yields. And they're all just going up and to the right. There's nothing bad happening. You can look at polar bear data, and you can look at number of hurricanes and stuff. You can look all the stuff up pretty easily. You can find out that there's supposed to be this narrative that everything is getting worse, but it just isn't. There's you can go down any little rabbit hole you want and nothing's getting worse. It's fluctuating all over. Some years are bad fire years and some are not. But overall, last 100 years, fires like in the U.S., there's way less fires in the U.S. now than there were in the first half of last century. They were way worse back then. So the whole idea that CO2 causes fires, they don't. It doesn't cause fires. Not at all.
Oh yeah, I remember when Australia, like the forest fires in Australia were going up.
Yes.
That was a bit scary when I was little.
But then this isn't anything new.
Yeah.
As Tom highlights in the movie. In fact, I found some clips. I run the movie through Opus just to see what kind of clips it would pick out. I don't know if you're familiar with Opus, but it's an AI tool.
I'm not. No.
Okay, so you just drop your link in there, literally that simple. Drop your link from YouTube into Opus. I have a paid account, but you can do it for free to mess around with. And it will chop your film up into like 1 to 2 minute segments and give you little clips, which you can then smash around on social media. So I've got a few here that I thought were pretty cool. I'll just play you. Play you one. Right, here we go. And let's make sure I've got the volume up here. Right.
Are in fact simply reinforcing the mantras and the mainstream arguments of.
Hang on, that didn't start from the beginning. No, no need to share the screen. Yeah. Okay. So here we go.
An activist, you're actually facilitating a huge validation of the government running our lives. Many environmentalists, most environmentalists, all environmentalists who consider themselves to be radical, progressive alternatives are in fact simply reinforcing the mantras and the mainstream arguments of the entire establishment. The demands on the government mean that the government suddenly gains the authority to interfere into every nook and cranny of our lives and how we live.
Everything has a climate narrative attached to it. How much you consume, where you spend your money, how much you travel, who you interact with, what types of food you eat, whether you eat meat. Everything has some sort of aspect that can be controlled.
If you're a climate activist,
Oh, there you go. So yeah, that was one of the clips that it picked out. So it's awesome stuff, and there's so much in there.
Yeah, I have to start using that software. I do think Isabella Santos mentioned that to me, I think, and I just haven't used it yet. But yeah, because a lot of people don't have time to watch the whole 80 minutes, but they have time to watch 30 seconds at a time. So yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
if you put these clips out on Twitter, you will get anywhere between 10,000 to 100,000 views on each one of those little clips. It's very, very powerful. And yeah, happy to help you spread that message. And once we've finished here, I can just walk you through it very quickly. And if you get a
Sounds
paid
great.
account, it's like $170. It's not much.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
an actual very useful AI tool. It's not like, messing around with Chat GPT and getting like silly woke answers about everything.
I definitely have to do that. Thank you. Yep.
No problem. Lauren, did you have
Yeah.
any further questions?
I do not. So I think I might skedaddle.
All right.
So yeah, have
All
a
right.
good podcast and have a good day. So
All right.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, see you.
So
I
Tom,
wanna-
you weren't always a film producer or concentrating on climate scam. So what brought you to this point? Like, what were you doing? What was the original story of Tom Nelson back in the good old normie days? Before you red pilled yourself.
Yeah, I think I was a normie for way too long. I was just in the tech world. I was a consultant working on software and teaching classes and stuff for a long time. And there was this whole origin story with me that I was a bird watcher also. And in the year 2005 or so in the US, there was a rediscovery of the ivory-billed woodpecker. I don't know if I've told you this whole story, that it got huge publicity. It was on public radio, and they had an announcement, I think, at the White House. They rediscovered this extinct bird. Extinct woodpecker. It was just a huge deal. The thing had been gone for 50 years or more. They rediscovered it. But as I checked into it right away, I found out the whole thing was a complete crock, that they didn't rediscover it. But there was a peer-reviewed paper with 17 authors, and it was absolutely truth with a capital T. But if you looked at it as an ordinary person, you found out it was a total crock. So that is the first thing that got me thinking, peer-reviewed science doesn't have to be true. So at that point, somebody wrote to me and said, you should look into the climate thing as well, because it's the same deal. If you check into the evidence for yourself, you're going to find out that's a total crock. So that was around 2006 or 2007. So since then, that almost all the time, almost every day, I've spent a lot of time looking into the whole climate change thing, because it's such a big deal that they want to control our lives, and they want to increase taxes and take away our ability to eat meat, et cetera. It's such a huge scam. So much money has already changed hands that it's really held my interest all this time, just pushing back, first on Blogspot, then on Twitter, and then I started a podcast about it. So I've just been really into it and totally enjoying it for all that time since about 2007. I've been heavily immersed in this whole concept.
What's incredible to me, coming from a financial markets background, is that they managed to make a financial market out of thin air. Like, literally, the foundational asset that they're trading billions and billions of dollars in, and these carbon credit markets, what was it? Tesla were running the ZEVs, right? Zero emission.
Yes. Yep.
What would they be? Vehicles, and then using that carbon credit offset, and they were selling them on the open market to their competitors, basically. I'm like, my goodness, they literally did manage to trade thin air. Like,
they did. Yeah, it's been referred to as non-delivery of an invisible substance to no one. It's just completely crazy that so much money changed hands. I think they had some conferences over in Asia, maybe with thousands of people attending. They're all focused on this non-delivery invisible substance, and there's no real checking. They can sell the same carbon credits possibly more than one time. It's just amazing that this has been allowed to go on. It is still going on. And I think even today in the U.S., there are might be Apple and Google possibly saying our data centers are run 100% on renewable energy. which is it's not true. They're using these credits to pretend that it's true, but they're still being, the mainstream media is just kind of nodding their head and saying, "Oh, great, you're running your data center on wind and sun." But anyway, they're just pretending to because they are buying these credits. And we got to get rid of this whole scam. I think it is going to crumble, but it's amazing that it's been allowed to go for decades. Yeah, so much money, so much.
So much money, because then you also had the ESG narrative, and
Yeah.
you've got consultants now, like around the world, charging ridiculous amounts of money to work with companies to make sure that they're carbon neutral as best can be. I see you're flicking something up. Are you going to drop some numbers or something? Have you got?
Well, just as you're saying this, Efrat, our friend Efrat Fenixson, just sent me an email about this, about how this thing is crumbling. It's a headline called "U.S. Banks Pull the Plug on Climate Activism." There was a net zero banking alliance where all the big banks were in this, and just in the last month, they're just fleeing. Like they're fleeing from the sinking ship. The big banks are getting out of this alliance. So I was just getting ready to talk about that because this thing got built up. It got so huge, but right in front of us, right now, as we speak, it's crumbling, and I'm loving every minute of it. This could be one of those things that's gradually and then suddenly, where it was gradually imploding, and it looks like it might be suddenly imploding. But there's so many people who have they're pushed all their chips in on this thing. All of their life is based on this scam. And I don't think those people are just going to tomorrow say, I was wrong all this time. I'm going to become a coder or something. I think people are going to cling to it. But anyway, it's imploding as we speak.
They're going to have to cling to it. How many people have hung their hat on this thing for decades?
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you've got a 40-year-old climatologist, whatever they call themselves, who has built a career on this whole thing, been peer reviewed up the wazoo by his chosen few, where do you go? Like, where do you go when all of this falls over? You're going to have to cling on to it. You've got to double down, triple down, quadruple down, and just wreck your reputation.
Yeah, I think it's so painful that they've been calling people like me denier. They've been raving about how stupid the people are who don't believe in this, and how evil Donald Trump is for not believing in this. They can't just turn around and say, "Hey, I guess Trump was right, and I was on the wrong side all this time." That's just way too painful. So I think a lot of these people are just going to hold on to it until they get to their grave, so they never have to admit publicly that they were wrong. But a huge number of people aren't all in on it, and they can switch their opinions, and they can say, well, I've decided that there is really no problem. But it's just a certain subset are not going to give up, but the rest of the people are going to flip, I think.
Well, in this country, we've got the king, right, that wanted he started the clock, right, in London, the 2030 countdown to get net zero by 2030. Yeah. And, you are the carbon they wish to remove.
Yeah. I do think what's going to happen with most people, I've said this online too, is they're just going to stop talking about it. I think we're already seeing that now, that it just won't come up. It's not like all kinds of people are going to publicly state the skeptics were right. They're just, all of a sudden, you're going to look around and say, hey, they're not talking about climate anymore. I think that's how this whole thing is going to end. They're going to move on to something else. But it won't be... It'll just be silence. What you'll notice is silence. That's how you know it's over.
So when you look back over the course of your years on this planet, when did the gaslighting begin? Because we haven't just had global warming, right? This goes back decades. Do you remember like the kind of domino fall for you personally throughout your lifetime?
I don't know if you're talking about, if you go back to I'm old enough to remember the 1970s, and there was a global cooling scare in the 70s. They were talking about how it's getting colder and colder since the World War II. It just keeps getting colder. What are we going to do? And maybe we need to put soot on the glaciers to melt them because the glaciers are going to get too big. They're actually saying stuff like that because it really was cooling. And not only that, but there's a guy named Steven Schneider who was writing papers saying it's cooling, it's dangerous, it's caused by fossil fuels. And then within about 3 years, the same guy was saying it's warming, it's dangerous, and the cause is fossil fuels. Same guy. Pretty amazing. So there was a pretty big switch there because naturally it's switched. Earliest did start warming in the late 1970s, and it warmed at least for 2 or 3 decades from there. So then I don't know if they're going to, it does keep fluctuating as the decades go on. There's no reason to believe we're not going to see 3 more decades of cooling sometime soon. And I'm wondering if they're actually going to flip again and say, oh, just kidding. Now the problem really is global cooling and the cause still is fossil fuels. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with that this time around, but I think they might try it. Pretty amazing.
And I remember, I don't know if you guys had this in the US, but over here, I want to say it was the 80s. We had the big acid rain scare.
Yes.
That was in the
that.
news. And I remember being 10, 12, whatever it was, just shit scared of that stuff. I mean, what are you telling me? It's gonna rain and my face is gonna melt off if I'm outside? Like acid rain? Like what? What do you mean? But there used to be a program in the UK called News Round, and it would come on around 5:15, just as kids were getting home from school and settling in, and they'd watched a cartoon or two, and then boom, News Round, and it was a nice little summary of news around the world, especially tailored to children. And I remember like thinking, acid rain, like, why would we go outside? Like, I'll never play in the rain again. Did you have that over there?
I remember hearing about it, and I don't really know what ended up happening with that. I remember hearing about it a lot, even in the late 80s, I think. They were talking about it, and then it just, I don't know, they moved on to something else. I'm not sure. Maybe to the ozone hole. I heard a lot about the ozone hole. Yeah.
That would have been the 90s, right?
Probably was. And the narrative now is, hey, we fixed the ozone hole using whatever cap and trade or whatever they did. What was the Montreal Protocol? But there's a guy named Steve Malloy, the junk science guy, who you may have seen him online. And he makes the point over and over that we didn't fix the ozone hole. It was just it's natural fluctuations. It gets bigger, it gets smaller. We didn't do anything to make it bigger or smaller. And it's kind of the same now as it was 30 years ago or 50 years ago. So I think that narrative, like almost all these environmental narratives, even that one is wrong. I don't think humans caused an ozone hole. I think it was
remember
natural.
that. I remember that as a kid. And the big scare there was make sure you run out whenever you're outside, slap on the toxic sun lotion, because that's going to save you. And the ozone hole was, I can't remember the stat, but it was over, I would say it was X amount of thousands of acres above New Zealand or Australia and growing. And those poor people over there and yada, yada. And it's bleaching the coral reef. And it was endless. It didn't stop. Yeah.
I tended to believe that one. And then you mentioned the sunscreen one. As of like 4 years ago, I was still believing that one, that you got to put on the sunscreen or you're going to get skin cancer. There's a whole long list I have written down someplace of stuff I believed 5 or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just checking them off that now I got to look into it. And I think they were lying to us over and over. It wasn't just COVID. It's a lot of other stuff.
It certainly wasn't. My goodness, yeah.
Am I right?
Oh God, yeah. The sunscreen one was a new one to us as well about 2 years ago, and that was just a face palm. That was like, of course, like what were we thinking? Like, why would you put something full of goodness knows what chemicals and when you read it, what's actually in that stuff onto your skin that's going to go soak straight through it into your bloodstream, rather than just find a bit of shade and sit under a tree or, put up a parasol or something when you're on holiday and just tan slowly but surely.
So we have a little local magazine here in Minnesota that goes out to maybe a few thousand people or something. And there was just advice in there this week that if you're a woman, you should put on sunscreen every single day. We're here in Minnesota. The sun's barely up this time of year. But even now, you don't want to get any sun exposure if you go to the grocery store and you get 5 minutes of sun on your face. So that's how crazy it is. That still, you're supposed to be putting every single day, put it on your face because you're going to get damage to your skin. And I don't know what % of people are following that kind of crazy advice when they push it that hard. But I guess some. It's pretty amazing that they push it that hard.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So then the latest rabbit hole that you and I have been going down together, we've got a little, with Efrat. She was the one that kind of started talking about this, I think, first in the Bitcoin space. I'm not exactly sure, but she wrote an article about it. All of these lines in the sky that, this global phenomenon that is gripping the globe at the moment, where apparently now clouds can be straight lines, and that's perfectly normal. And they just spread over the 8 hours that they linger in the air and just gently block out the sun. And you start looking into that rabbit hole, and you find all kinds of philanthropic efforts for well-meaning people to spray stratospheric aerosol injection, they call it, particles into the troposphere, or solar radiation modification as well is another word, to reflect back the sunlight so that we're not going to reach that 2-degree limit in in temperature change to the upside. And I noticed actually Opus pulled a clip from the movie again, where the two scientists are talking about clouds. It's a German guy. Let me see. I think it was number, and they got cancelled. Number 22. No, number 11 maybe. Sorry, listeners. Whilst I scroll, I had everything written down here. Where's he gone? Well, never mind. Basically, the guys found it was the solar winds they were talking about.
Oh,
and you have right, yes, you have this solar activity, which here we go. And this is constantly changing, the solar like flares, and that will affect the clouds here on planet Earth. And it's the clouds that they explain, because big, bright, white, fluffy clouds, natural, do actually would reflect back the sunlight, and as a kind of a barrier. And this is something cyclical that happens depending on the strength of the solar winds and the cosmic rays. I'm sorry if I'm making a bit of a arse of this, but this is my basic level of understanding. And they come out and they proved this data, and then were cancelled immediately.
Yeah, you're talking about Svensmark and Shaviv, right? Those guys.
Yes, those.
Yeah, and cosmic rays. Yeah, so fluctuations in the sun affect the cloudiness on Earth. And just a tiny change in cloudiness on Earth makes a huge difference. And everybody on both sides of the debate agrees that we really don't understand clouds. It's so complicated. Yeah. But
wow. So nobody understands clouds, yet it seems perfectly fine for people, from what I can tell, from the research I have done, to carry out these geoengineering projects without anybody's consent, but fully funded and not even peer reviewed. We've got this guy that used to be at Harvard, this David Keith guy that seems to be like everybody's favorite dude to throw money at, to send these particles up into the air. And there was did you see the headline just 2 days ago? I put it in our little group about the fix for the climate, for the climate, the global warming, will be to spray diamond dust into the stratosphere to reflect the sun's rays. I'm like, what the hell? Who reads this stuff and thinks, one, that seems legit, or two, this is complete and utter lunacy? What are we talking about?
What was the cost that they put on that? Was it 170 trillion or something?
Oh God,
they had a cost on there that seemed a little bit rich to me, whatever it was.
Well, considering that diamonds are a scam. Yeah, exactly. That's another rabbit hole. What are your thoughts on that? I know you've been kind of looking into the rabbit hole a little bit. It's kind of new for both of us, but there's something up.
Yeah, so there's so much mainstream coverage kind of the idea that we're doing experiments. Someone's doing experiments with this SAI stuff, SRM stuff. So the whole idea that George Soros may be interested in it and funding it, but no one is doing any experiments. None of this has crossed over to the real world. I do not believe that. It has to have crossed over into the real world. But an interesting thing that you brought up that I've been looking into is the possibility of a change in the fuel from 1970 to now. I don't know if you have more detail on that. I've seen other people write about that too. The whole assumption that the fuel is exactly the same now as it was in the 70s. Maybe that's not true. Maybe some of it does not burn as clean. Or what do you think about that? I've seen that, and I don't know the answer yet. What do you think?
It certainly it isn't the same. There's lots more different aviation fuels available, and as we discussed, my spidey senses get pricked up when you see a lot of government chat and mandates and subsidies towards a specific area, and there is do your own research, people. Just Google in your own country sustainable aviation fuel and where you live, and look at the companies that are engaging in it and how many projects there are and how much money is involved in it. Now, in the UK, there's some crazy mandate out there that 2030, the magic number seems to be, all air traffic will be using either purely or a heavy mix of sustainable aviation fuel. So I wanted to know what goes into sustainable aviation fuel, like what constitutes this, and what the hell are we thinking? Honestly, like what's wrong with it's called A1 jet fuel, or it used to be like aviation fuel, and I think there was A and A1. So back in the 70s, goodness know what they had, but it would have been a much purer mix, I'm sure, and simple refinery process. Because I used to work the last year of my career. I used to work in commodity markets in Southeast Asia, primarily export of soft oils. They called them soft oils, palm oil, basically. That was the huge crop which destroyed all of the rainforests across Indonesia and Malaysia to be replanted with palm. And this palm oil was it was traded all over the world, and it was going into absolutely all of your foodstuffs. Now it seems to be replaced with the classic seed oils, rapeseed and sunflower, because we can grow them here in our Western Hemisphere. And now if you look around these regions in America as well, that seems to be the crop du jour, right? That crop is getting subsidized as well. So why is that getting subsidized? Why are governments pushing that? Because that ends up in the fuel mix, in sustainable aviation fuel, because that is one of the feedstocks. Now, with the palm oil, what was going on? It was going into, and this is where are we? 2012, 13, 14. There was a big push for biodiesel, especially in Europe. And a lot of the palm oil was being shipped out of Malaysia into the European markets, and they would dock at these big refinery stations, and then the palm oil would get refined into the fuel mix. And this is why we have like E5 or E10, it's called over here in the UK and France and Spain and whatever else. So that means like 5% or 10% of what used to be unleaded, pure refined fuel, fossil fuels, air quotes. We'll go down that rabbit hole in a second. Okay. So you've now got 5% or 10% of whatever. And it could have been palm oil, it could have been ethanol, it could have been, derived from corn, or it could have been derived from sunflower oil, or, canola, or rapeseed, as we call it here. And if you talk to any mechanic will tell you that slowly started fucking up the engines, because certain parts of the engine just corrode. And so I've spoken to Safe about it. Safe did a whole deep dive dissertation, PhD, on this subject, right? On energy and sustainable energy, and looked at fuel in particular. And this is where he got completely flipped on. He realized this is a total freaking scam, because the numbers don't add up at all. But the cars were being wrecked. So what the hell are we doing? What the hell are we doing? Like, now applying this same experiment to sustainable aviation fuel. And does it burn as clean? I don't know. I have my suspicions that it doesn't, but I've got to rely on the experts that tell me, yeah, whatever, you're no jet engineer, it's fine, bro, which seems to be about as good as it gets.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think here in the U.S., I think enormous amounts of small engines were ruined as we went to ethanol, or tried to heal the planet with this great fuel that turned out to be way worse than what we had before. So there's that precedent. I think there's been people trying to run buses on biodiesel or some sort of planet healing fuel, and then they don't run at all when it gets cold because they can't handle the cold weather. So the whole idea that we can just change the fuel in the jets and everything's going to be fine and not pollute and all that stuff. So with all this precedent of unintended consequences, I don't know. I think we should be very careful with changing the jet fuel. Or I guess we already did do that. But yeah, I'm not, I've been told again, like you have, that don't worry your pretty little head. It's already taken care of. It burns clean, but I'm not convinced at all.
Yeah. So I found it now on the UK government website, the SAF mandate. So sustainable aviation fuel. The SAF mandate will start in 2025. So we're in it. We're in the mandate, people. At time of recording, we're 7 days in to SAF mandate. 2% of total UK jet fuel demand increase on a linear basis to 10% in 2030, and then 22% in 2040. From 2040, the obligation will remain at 22% until there is greater certainty regarding SAF supply. All right, let's just fuck around and find out. Like Jesus, what are we doing? The mandate will encourage the innovation of advanced fuels that can generate greater emission reductions and the diversification of feedstocks to reduce dependency on scarce resources by including in the mandate. Right, okay, a cap on the feedstocks used in the hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids, HEFA process, but not until other types of SAF are also commercially viable, blah, 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 and on we go. So here's the key, right? Reduce dependency on scarce resources. What scarce resources? Oil is abundant. Abundant.
How much of this whole push is based on the whole climate scam?
All of it.
I don't know what percent of that is.
Yeah, 100%.
Is it 100?
On the climate scam? Yeah, this is like, so to talk about the fossil fuel things, fossil fuel thing and that rabbit hole. We touched on it a little bit over our lunch, and what had you'd spoken to someone that's looked into this and abiotic oil theory?
Yeah, two different people, Jerome Corsi and Suresh Bansal. I think they've done a total of 3 appearances on my podcast. Yeah, and they have different ideas of what's really going on. One thinks that abiotic hydrocarbons are complex ones, are created inside of the Earth. And the other one thinks that they were created long ago in the atmosphere. Very interesting, 2 different approaches. But there's this whole idea that there's enormous amounts of methane. Everyone agrees on Titan, Saturn's moon Titan, there's enormous amounts of methane. And we don't think there was ever life there. So that's a hydrocarbon. It's called a fossil fuel here, but it has nothing to do with life. And people are saying, a number of people are saying on my podcast that there was methane on Earth like 4 billion years ago, or way before we thought there was life to create methane. It was on Earth too. And some of the methane, even right now, is people agree that that was never part of life. It was just created abiotically somehow. But then there's a question of, can we actually get oil or coal, anything that's complex, can we get that without life? And I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't think anybody knows, but I do see enormous amounts of people who, again, are just super, they know for sure that oil came from life. We know that 100%, and there's no debate to be had, but I think there is debate to be had. This Suresh guy who was on my podcast, he thinks that we're being fooled by the oil that's on Earth because there are some organic markers in there, but he thinks that it was created abiotically, and then later on there were some organics mixed in there. That's his theory. And it's hard to tell really what was going on Earth 3 billion years ago. It's very hard to figure out, what conditions did we have? I had a guy on my podcast that argued that there are microplastics in the ocean that are abiotic. They were created because in some cases there was just the right mixture of chemicals and heat and everything, so that there could be microplastics that were not created by us. They were created by natural processes. And he might be right. I don't know. My mind is open.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That I've not heard, but immediately, you piqued my interest, and intuitively something sounds as though, I'll be interested to know what you find out about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of Willie Soon. I'm a big fan of that guy. He's been on my podcast. He's been on my podcast a few times, and he went on Tucker Carlson and talked about abiotic hydrocarbons. So, because he's saying, I mean, there's been a lot of conditions on Earth. We can't assume Earth was always just like it is right now. It's been incredibly hot sometimes, and the atmosphere was composed of very different things. Over 4 billion years, a lot of different stuff happened, and there may have been the right mixture of heat and chemicals to produce a lot of things that we're not aware of a long time ago. So, if methane can be produced on Titan and because of things that happen up there, that it could happen here too. Maybe it's happened on a lot of places in the solar system. There might be hydrocarbons many different places that we're not aware of. It's a big world. It's a big universe. Yeah.
So you're telling me all the dinosaurs didn't just all get together and, dig a mass grave and die in the Middle East together. And
I think
over the years,
I think that's unlikely. I mean, there's this whole story that this was made up by maybe the Rockefellers in order to create the idea that there's a very finite supply, that we should believe it all came from dinosaurs. There's only so many dead dinosaurs. That's why we shouldn't burn too much oil. I wouldn't doubt that there was some of that, but I don't know. My major point is my mind is open. It's I don't know the answer, but my mind is open. Yeah.
So that's where peak oil theory comes from. It's M. King Hubbert, Hubbert, Hubbert.
Okay.
And this is the podcast that I just randomly listened to and then started going down the rabbit hole. It blew my mind. I'm like, well, what do you mean? There's another way like that oil could have been produced. And the way I had understood it was there was all kinds of chemical reactions going on in the crust of the earth, way deeper than we could ever imagine.
Yes,
being able to drill.
Yeah.
Like, forget it. And that was having chemical reactions and being pushed up through the fissures into these massive, giant underground pools, which we obviously known as oil wells now, that will just keep regenerating themselves. It doesn't matter how much you tap into them. It will just keep filling up. So in 1956, it was, and I'm reading now straight from Wiki, so people can go and check it for themselves. This is where peak oil theory came from in 1956, that Hubbert proposed that fossil fuel production in a given region over time would follow a rough bell-shaped curve without giving a precise formula. He later used the Hubbert curve, the derivative of the logistic curve, for estimating future production using past observed discoveries. This is the whole thing. He's like, all right, yeah. So when you find oil, there's going to be this much bell curve and then down and all gone. And one day we'll all be out and we'll have to find a different form of energy. He was going around like the dog and pony show, throwing these ideas around in scientific circles. And of course, yes, the Rockefellers picked up on it and started funding him to go out and keep this research going, because it's in their best interest. Oil is scarce. We're going to run out of it, guys, just to keep the price high. I mean, the price of this stuff, it's somebody once, it was another podcast I was just listening to recently, like the second most abundant thing on earth is oil after water. And you're like, holy shit, like we really have been lied to. This stuff should be so cheap. And we should be, if the refinery process hadn't been screwed with, and if engines could have been, left alone to advance themselves, we'd be running a whole car on a cup of oil. It's unreal that we've fallen for all of this crap.
So this guy, Suresh Bansal, who's been on my podcast, he's been studying this abiotic theory of his. We've been looking into it for over 40 years. And his theories are so interesting because he thinks Saturn's moon Titan is like a younger version of Earth. So it's sitting there. It's got just enormous amounts of methane. It's sitting there waiting, and it could develop life, possibly as Earth did, if there's some huge cataclysm, like an enormous comet hits it and creates the conditions where then the oil can be created. And he thinks that happened sometime on Earth, that Earth was sitting around with lots of methane, and there was some cataclysm that caused oil to be formed, and then life formed after that. So the oil was here before the dinosaurs were here. That's his theory. Yep. And then some organics mixed into it later. So we think it all came from life. But anyway, he thinks it was there first. Then at some point, life evolved. And the oil we're getting now was formed before life was on Earth. And I don't know the answer, but I have not heard anyone else say this. And I'm not sure he's wrong. Maybe he's right. I don't know.
I don't even want to go down the dinosaurs didn't exist rabbit hole. That one's too far for me.
No, he thinks the dinosaurs existed.
Right. Oh, yeah, I know him. But there are people probably listening to this. It's like, yeah, whatever, Princey, dinosaurs didn't even exist, you mug. Like, there's those people out there too. And, you know, all power to them. Goodness me. But the fact that oil was here before even dinosaurs, we led this merry dance. That, it's look at any textbook. Look at this, the kids in our schools are still learning this crap. This is what's so distressing.
It is, yeah.
And this goes all the way back to the beginning here, where we had Lauren on the, the bullshit that they're taught in these state indoctrination camps, the gulags, as I like to call them. Oh God, it's just so bad. So yeah. Please, listeners, consider not sending your kids into, if we want to starve the beast, stop feeding it.
Yeah.
So,
I do have a little note here that I made back when Lauren was still on. Something about how they want to use this climate scam to control us. I wanted to bring up the C40 cities thing. Are you aware of the C40 cities document that says a whole bunch of close to 100 major city mayors signed it, and their goals in there is to allow you and me by 2030 only 3 pieces of clothing per year. That's it.
What?
It actually spells that out. It's actually a document that's online right now, signed by all of these people. It's not a conspiracy theory.
What's it called? C40 document or something?
C40 cities. Yeah, I can send you the link to it. That's just part of it. That's just the part about clothing. But no meat. Nobody eats any meat by 2030, 0, and no dairy. So you want to drink milk, whatever? Nope. Because of climate change reasons, these people signed this thing saying 3 pieces of clothing, no meat, no dairy by 2030. And I don't know about flights, maybe 1 flight or maybe 0 flights per person. The whole thing is just completely crazy that they think that we're going to just completely change our lives. The whole thing is based on the idea that CO2 is causing bad weather and we can't have that. So just that's how crazy the whole thing's gotten.
This is mad. Okay, so I've just opened up like the list of cities that are signing this just in Europe alone. I'm looking at. So yeah, c40.org/cities. If anybody wants to go to see what maniacs are signing up to this, I'll list them for you: Amsterdam, Athens, Barcelona, Berlin, Copenhagen, Heidelberg, Istanbul, Lisbon, London, Madrid, Milan, Oslo, Paris, Rome, Rotterdam, Stockholm, Tel Aviv, and Warsaw. Lunacy.
Yeah, I just sent you more information via DM on X if you want to look at any more. But it's so crazy.
Let's pull that up. Mayors of C40 cities are committed to using an inclusive, science-based God. Inclusive and science-based, right there. The three buzzwords. A collaborative approach to cut their fair share of emissions in half by 2030. Help the world limit global heating to 1.5 degrees and build healthy, equitable, and resilient communities. C40 supports mayors to do this by raising climate ambition, building equitable and thriving communities, building a global movement, scaling up climate, and facilitating access to finance. Oh, of course. There's the subsidy every single time. Reduce the number of clothing and textile items. Here you go. Consumption intervention. Oh my God. Reduce number of clothing and textile items. Progressive target in 2030. 8 new clothing items per person per year. Ambitious target. 3 new clothing items per person per year. These people are insane.
Yeah, so it sounds like for sure it's a conspiracy theory. This can't be real, but you click on it, it's up there right now. I can't believe it's still up there. As of this date, today, it's still there. They got to take it down because it's so embarrassing. Yeah.
Oh my. It's just... these people, mayors, and don't forget, you voted them in, people listening. So just stop doing that too, please.
Yes,
Opt out,
yeah.
and opt out means opt out. Just every time we cast a vote for these morons, we're validating the system in which it bonded us to slavery. It's complete lunacy.
Absolutely. I have one other quick note here that I made when also when she was still here. The whole reason I think that Bitcoiners had me on their podcast at the start was because the whole global warming thing is really a push against Bitcoin in some sense too, right? We can't have Bitcoin mining because that uses energy and that's going to cause hurricanes. So I think that's been used a lot as a negative of Bitcoin. It causes bad weather. And I think people, some of them in the Bitcoin community are saying, well, okay, it causes some bad weather, but not too much or whatever. I don't think we should give the climate scammers even 1 inch. We shouldn't give them any of this because it doesn't cause any bad weather. I think we should, mine proudly and not apologize to anybody about it. There should be no apologies.
I 100% agree with you, to the point where, you know what? Fuck your wind farms. We're not going to use the Bitcoin mining. We're not going to validate your bullshit.
Right.
Because by using, I know, I get it, it's stranded energy and whatever else, but there's shit tons of stranded energy, far better energy. And just to try and, okay, so if the mayor comes in and says, right, we're going to use Bitcoin mining to, stop us having to turn off the windmills and curtail and blah, 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 and overproduce and stabilize the grid. I'd love it if Bitcoin, no, you fuck this up. You figure it out. We're fine. We're fine mining on like real good, solid energy that is stranded and wasn't man-made and put out there and wrecking the landscape. And, it's just, and same with solar, perhaps on a micro scale, if you can do it at home and, you want to use the power for yourself. And then when you're not using it, you're mining your Bitcoin. That's one thing completely. That's a different thing. But to have a solar farm just like a blot on the landscape, then get validated because it's mining Bitcoin, and then they can use that money to go and build out more solar farms. We don't need to be doing that. Like, no, we've got to be absolutely crushing this whole thing, personally, is the way I'm thinking about it now.
Yeah. So, I live here in Minnesota. We're above the 45th parallel here. It's pretty far north. I had a guy, an expert on my podcast, saying that solar panels generally aren't worthwhile above 30 degrees latitude, that they're in their whole lifespan. It takes more energy to have them than to not have them if you put them way up north here. And I see that around here up by my dad's farm. They're putting up solar panels and they're covered with snow a good portion of the winter. The sun's at a low angle. It doesn't make sense. We're probably just subsidizing. We're just blowing money on subsidies for no good reason. And it's costing us energy rather than gaining us energy. So I think we need to let every form of energy just to compete on its own merits and not try to heal the planet by having people put up solar panels in Minnesota. It makes no sense. It's just another stupid thing that we should not be doing.
No,
totally not.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And yes, the FUD that's just surrounded Bitcoin, especially on this topic over the years, like, it's bad for the environment. It boils the ocean. We've got Susie Ward here. She heads up the Bitcoin Policy UK, and she has been chasing the BBC, I want to say probably a year now, to renege on an article that they put out about Bitcoin uses every Bitcoin transaction uses the same amount, the equivalent amount of a swimming pool full of water or something. Like the most ridiculous headline.
Yeah.
And they keep ignoring her and blowing her off and getting, just behind like the red tape that they're easily able to do as a big organization. But she will not give up. So Susie, if you're listening, please keep fighting and let's right these wrongs, because we've faced it. I mean, the whole life of Bitcoin, basically. As soon as they picked up on it and started trying to FUD it, that was the main thing. Like, it's bad for the environment.
Yeah, it's just so odd that Bitcoin is supposed to be bad for the environment because it uses energy, but nobody ever says the whole fiat money system, we can't use that, it uses energy, or you can't dry your clothes, that uses energy. It's amazing how Bitcoin itself is singled out there for the FUD, but I guess that's what FUD is. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
I think we've covered all corners here. Well, is there anything else that we didn't touch on?
I think that's it for now. Yeah, I think we covered a lot here. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Well, let's make. How can people see the movie? I'll put the link in there. What's the best place for them to go and find it?
Yeah, they can go to climatethemovie.net and see it there. But there's about 100 copies of it or more actually. There's lots of full copies up kind of everywhere. Yeah.
I know. I saw that today.
Yeah.
I just put it in to get it up for Lauren. I put it in YouTube. And I'm like, oh wow, people are just copying this thing and putting it out there. This is awesome.
That's what we hope for because we were worried about censorship, but if it's everywhere, it's hard to take it down from everywhere. So good.
All right, Tom. If you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Well, just because Peter Zehan, is that his name? You know that guy?
No.
Oh, he's everywhere. He's talking about geopolitics and stuff. He's kind of omnipresent. He was saying that Bitcoin is worth minus $1,000 per Bitcoin. He was saying that. Maybe I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Peter Zehan. I would give it to him because he has such a huge audience and he's completely full of it. And I would like to see him see the light because that would be good.
How do I not know who this guy is?
Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Zeihan. Peter
Yeah.
Zeihan. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I
everywhere
found
on
him.
my feeds all the time. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah,
That
the
guy.
first the first thing I find, he's been on Pomp's show. Okay. Of
Yes.
course. All right.
Well, yeah. There's no value to this asset, and he gives the big air quotes.
I saw someone else talking about that today. Who was Steve Hankey. He's back.
Oh,
The
okay.
guy from follow him on Twitter just for the lols. He's the head professor of economics, whatever it's what's that university? Johns Hopkins.
Oh,
You
okay.
got to listen to this guy to believe it. It's unbelievable.
I'll have to do that. Yeah.
He's getting retweeted around Twitter right now at the moment by the Bitcoiners because it's just incredibly it's stupid.
Peter is a guy that's just incredibly confident about everything he says. Over half of it is BS, but he says it so confidently that people listen. It's amazing.
Right. A classic sign of a charlatan.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on, Tom. And let's shill your podcast so people can come and listen to your work.
Oh. Yeah, it's the Tom Nelson podcast. And we've done about 270 episodes or so. It's been super fun. But it's very heavily focused on climate and energy. Just a little Bitcoin on there, but mostly climate energy.
Yeah. Well, the flippening is real, Tom. You'll have a Bitcoin only podcast before you know it.
I think I might. Yeah. We'll see. I should.
All right, mate. Well, great to see you.
All right.
Take care. And thanks for everything you're doing.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Goodbye.